Mortal Kombat is awesome. Mortal Kombat is one of my favorite video game franchises, and if I remember correctly, was one of the first rated M game series I was allowed to play when I was younger. Mortal Kombat is one of the first fighting game series that I ever played before I even touched other fighting game series like Street Fighter, Fighter Z, or even Tekken. Mortal Kombat from the arcade era to the NRS era, the series has sold millions, and Mortal Kombat X and 11 especially broke records in terms of fighting game sales. But before we really talk about Mortal Kombat and how it dominated the fighting game scene, we gotta talk about how Mortal Kombat really came to be. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, we saw the modern fighting game genre being born. Fatal Fury Street Fighter 2 hit the scene in 1991 and truly changed the fighting game genre as we know it today, especially with the release of Street Fighter 2. Because not only did this game pioneer modern fighting game mechanics as we know it today, but this game truly has been regarded as one of the greatest and most influential games of all time. At the time, arcades had some of the better graphics. Home consoles like the Nintendo Entertainment System were able to have graphics that somewhat compared to the arcades, and even could play similar titles. But Street Fighter 2 was truly the game to really go to arcades to, because it had it all: an iconic roster of characters, a rocking soundtrack, the vibrant graphics, and a small glitch that ended up creating the combo system we know today. During the arcades, one of the more bigger names that were talked about in discussions was Midway Games, as Midway is one of the biggest juggernauts within the arcade scene, licensing titles like Namco's Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man. However, their biggest success came in 1978 when they licensed Space Invaders for American audiences, which really kickstarted Midway's popularity. During the 80s, Midway was a big name as they created games like Rampage, Joust, and a little game called Narc, a game that promoted against the use of drugs, especially during an era where anti-drug ads were on the rise, and the game had the slogan, "Winners don't use drugs." This game was considered violent and pushed the boundaries of what was truly appropriate for children in the arcades. Around 1988, we got the release of Namco's Splatterhouse, a 2D beat-em-up arcade game that uses a character that looks oddly similar to Friday the 13th's Jason Voorhees. This game had a grotesque and disturbing visuals and was considered to be very gory at the time. Critics and parents complained how Splatterhouse was really graphic for younger audiences. Around this time of Street Fighter 2's popularity, Midway wanted to create their own fighting game, and thus Ed Boon and John Tobias were tasked to make this new fighting game. Midway saw an opportunity to seek out the rights to Hollywood actor Jean-Claude Van Damme, but this didn't end up happening, as John was involved with another fighting game project with his likeness. However though, the game with his likeness ended up being scrapped, and thus John Tobias and Ed Boon instead made an original IP for Midway, while taking heavy inspiration based off Asian martial art films. And only 10 months later, a little fighting game will drop in 1992 and shock the entire world for generations to come. Mortal Kombat was released in August 1992 and completely dominated the arcade scene. And what made this game stand out compared to other fighting games at the time was the use of digitized graphics, which created a semi-realistic style. The digitized graphics took the motion capture of the actors in front of the gray screen and really brought them to life in the game. Mortal Kombat wasn't the first fighting game to use this style of graphics, as another fighting game in 1990, Pit Fighter, was one of the earliest to use digitization. And Midway used this technology in their other titles, but Mortal Kombat was one of the games that truly popularized this style of graphics. But what made this game stand out compared to its competition was that it used blood whenever you hit an opponent. But what made this game really controversial was the fatalities. In Street Fighter 2, if you do enough damage to an enemy, they will get dizzy, which allows you to get a couple hits in. This concept is in Mortal Kombat as well, but once you defeat an opponent, they will also get dizzy, but now the announcer in an on-screen message will tell you to finish her/him, and if you input a certain amount of inputs, you can pull off a finishing move known as a fatality. This part of the game led to a lot of parents and the mass media to an outcry against the violence in video games. Mortal Kombat use of gore was so bad that it was banned/censored in other countries, even in the game's later titles. In 1993, Mortal Kombat and another controversial game, Night Trap, another game that also used digitized graphics on the Sega CD, were really the main talking points of violence in video games during the 1993 congressional hearing and response, which at the time, video games didn't really have much of an age rating due to a lot of games at the time appealing to mainly a wider general audience of families and children. But these two games were the catalyst into creating what is now known as the ESRB, which is similar to how we rate movies in terms of age appropriateness, but honestly it didn't matter as Mortal Kombat was still an arcade juggernaut. Mortal Kombat in terms of story was quite simple. 500 years ago, before the events of the first game, a 2,000-year-old man named Goro, who was also part dragon, was reigning champion of the Mortal Kombat tournament, until a Shaolin monk named the Great Kung Lao defeated Goro, and was the new Mortal Kombat champion. Hey, editing self here, so I actually kinda got this part wrong. It's actually the other way around. It's actually Goro that defeats the Great Kung Lao, not actually, the Great Kung Lao defeating Goro, and this is even backed up by the MK comic itself, so my mistake. A powerful sorcerer named Shang Tsung took matters into his own hands and years later is now hosting the tournament. This game, like Street Fighter 2, has another cast of colorful characters that are iconic in their own way. First we have Liu Kang, the chosen Shaolin monk from the White Lotus Society, and as our main canonical protagonist in this game, and Liu Kang was heavily inspired by Bruce Lee. Even though he was quite the popular character, a lot of people found his fatality to be very weak and not as effective as the other characters. Next we have Johnny Cage, the narcissistic Hollywood actor who was trained by multiple martial arts masters. Johnny Cage was actually the first character to be conceived during development of the game, as he was based off on Jean-Claude Van Damme, and basically his whole existence is the leftovers of that cancelled project. The next character on the roster is Raiden, who is a thunder god who took the form of a human to partake in the Mortal Kombat tournament. Raiden has two primary inspirations, a Japanese deity known as Raiden, and a character named Lightning in the film Big Trouble in Little China. Kano was a Japanese-American mercenary who was part of the dangerous criminal group known as the Black Dragon. Kano's design was somewhat based on the Terminator, and fun fact, the idea of Kano being Australian was something that the 1995 movie adaptation introduced, and has stuck ever since, even in later titles. One of the more interesting characters on the roster is Sonya Blade, as she is the member of the US Top Special Forces unit, who along with her team is on the hunt for Kano and his Black Dragon, and eventually got stuck inside the Shang Tsung tournament. Sonya was a very late addition to the game, as the game originally had a roster of primarily male characters originally. She was gonna be a male character named Striker, but was altered, and Ed Boon gave her the name Sonya based on his sister. Now, even though this roster on its own is quite fine, and I think it will work as a game on its own, this game had to introduce two ninja characters that will single-handedly be one of the most recognizable aspects about this franchise. The two iconic ninjas, Sub-Zero and Scorpion. Sub-Zero is an ice-based ninja who is a mysterious warrior but comes from the ninja clan known as the Lin Kuei. Next we have Scorpion. His identity, like Sub-Zero, is unknown, but what we do know is that he's a ninja who has a burning hatred towards Sub-Zero. When it comes to Scorpion, you cannot forget about his iconic catchphrases. Oh, get over here! Come here! Was actually voiced by Ed Boon himself, and at this point, yeah, Scorpion is like the main mascot of the series. These ninjas, unlike the other characters, were actually pilot swap sprites of themselves, and they did this because of hardware limitations and also to expand upon the roster of characters. Now, what I mentioned earlier right now is the initial roster of playable characters, as there are 3 more characters I have yet to mention, as they are the unplayable characters, but I'll get to those characters later. Gameplay wise, Mortal Kombat is quite simple. I'm not exactly an expert when it comes to fighting game combos / controls, but I'll give you a general basis of Mortal Kombat's combat system. You have 2 separate buttons for a low punch and a high punch, along with separate buttons for low kicks and high kicks, and what was cool about this game was the uppercuts, as the moment you land one, the screen will temporarily freeze watching your opponent in the air until they fall back down. Unlike Street Fighter 2, you do have a dedicated block button. It's a traditional walk, or you hold backwards to block attacks. In terms of performing special moves, Street Fighter 2 uses a more quarter circle motion style of movements, where Mortal Kombat used a similar directional base to use special attacks. And like I said earlier, once you defeat an opponent, you have the option to simply attack them, ending the round, or hit a certain input depending on the character to see the enemy fall into the hands of a gruesome fatality. And just like Street Fighter 2, when you play on single player, there is an arcade ladder full of fighters and you have to challenge the characters in the roster. There are the main 1v1 matches, you know, the standard 2 to 3 rounds depending on the wins or loses, and a mirror match which is the same thing but with the same character you're playing as, an endurance round where you fight 2 fighters at the same time, and test your might, where you have to mash buttons very quickly to the limit before the time runs out, and gets progressively harder each time you do one of these stages. And this was inspired by Street Fighter 2's Test Your Strength minigame, and once you get near the end of the tower, you're faced with 2 boss fights, Goro and the final boss Shang Tsung. Since this was an arcade game, the AI in this game were very challenging in most fights, especially these bosses, and depending on the character you choose, you get a different ending for each character. That explains more of the story of the game. There is one more boss, and to find him you have to follow very certain clues that will eventually teleport you to the bottom of the pit stage, where you fight another palette swap ninja named Reptile. Reptile was this mysterious green ninja that uses the same moveset as Sub-Zero and Scorpion, and he was basically the only secret character in the game. Mortal Kombat's visual style was a lot more grittier compared to other fighting games at the time, with its semi-realistic art style like I stated earlier, and each stage reflected this, as a lot of this game was made practically, with even characters like Goro being made with stop motion, and Dan Forden, a man I'll be bringing up in the video a lot, really elevated the atmosphere with his musical score, as each song in this game features a more synth-like score that incorporates Eastern influenced sounds. Overall, Mortal Kombat became a huge success for Midway, and eventually on September 13th, 1993, a day known as Mortal Monday, Mortal Kombat hit the scene on home consoles. The Super Nintendo was the more superior version in terms of visuals, but the fatalities were censored and the game used sweat instead of blood, which made this game, in the eyes of many, inferior to the Genesis version. The second Genesis port for the most part was quite censored and didn't look as good as the Super Nintendo version, but what made this game really stand out was the secret blood code, as it allowed the game to be as gory as the arcade release. There was a secret cheat menu that allowed you to not only see the blood code, but also allowed you to see Ferguson McGovern's head on screen. For those who don't know, Ferguson McGovern was the founder of Probe Software, and Probe Software was practically in charge with handling most of the ports that came to the more home consoles. On the Game Boy version, which by the way was the worst version to play this game, once you beat the game, you can unlock Goro as a playable character. Overall, Mortal Kombat was a game that truly changed the video game industry as a whole, with its violence literally creating the ESRB rating system as we know today, spawning a popular franchise with an animated show, a film adaptation in 1995, and a comic book series. Because of the impact and success of the first game, a sequel had to be made, and with only a couple months, a true sequel to Mortal Kombat was officially released. Mortal Kombat 2 was released in November 1993 and expanded upon so much from the first game. The game, while retaining a similar visual style to the first, the game now looks sharper and the gameplay became a lot more tighter. It introduces a new realm that our characters call Outworld, and this new realm introduces a set of new stages that are way more iconic than the first game. Stages like the Deadpool and the Living Forest have become series staples. To really emphasize the new changes in stage design, the new stages are way more vibrant, but stages like the Deadpool really give off more of an eerie feeling. And Dan Forden is once again back on the soundtrack, but his songs in this game really help emphasize the atmosphere of these stages while incorporating a flute-like sound because of the new improvements of the arcade sound chip. The story of Mortal Kombat 2 is pretty simple. It takes place shortly after the first game, as Liu Kang defeated both Goro and Shang Tsung. Shang Tsung is shown with the new mysterious big bad, as the new enemy threatens to punish Shang Tsung because of his failures of the first game. But Shang Tsung comes up with a compromise. This mysterious enemy grants Shang Tsung his youth, and this new enemy is revealed to be the Outworld Emperor himself, Shao Kahn. And is by far my favorite antagonist out of any MK game. Shao Kahn wants the fighters in Outworld in his tournament for a home court advantage, and if they lose, Shao Kahn can invade Earth. And Mortal Kombat 2 has a brand new set of characters which really expands the roster from the first game. Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, Raiden, and Scorpion are once again all playable from the first game, along with Reptile and Shang Tsung, who were previously unplayable but are now selectable characters in the roster. Sub-Zero is playable again, but this new Sub-Zero is named Kuai Liang, as the original Sub-Zero from the first game canonically died to the hands of Scorpion. Liu Kang is now joined by a new Shaolin monk named Kung Lao, who is a descendant of the great Kung Lao who was mentioned in the first game. And compared to Liu Kang, he is way more brutal with his razor head. In the roster, you can notice that Kano and Sonya are no longer present as playable characters, as they were the least played characters in the original, so Sonya and Kano were used as background characters in Shao's arena. But to fill up Sonya's role, we have Jax, who is the leader of the Special Forces unit, and originally he was going to be a Kurdish striker in the first game, but was switched to Jax during development of MK2. Next we have Baraka. Baraka is this disfigured man who is part of like a nomadic race of mutants in Outworld who led the attacks on the Shaolin monks, which really kickstarted the motivation why Liu Kang even wants to go to Outworld. And during the development of MK2, he was going to be this secret martial artist wearing a mask. This concept was a little too similar to Reptile as we have in this game, so it was switched to really embrace the whole monster look. This game, just like the first game, introduced new palette swap ninjas, but these ones are female, as we get Katana and Melina. Katana is Shao Kahn's personal assassin, but her role in the tournament remains mysterious, as she was seen with a mysterious Earthrealmer, which I can probably presume is Liu Kang. She was originally given the original Mortal Kombat as Kitsune, but was saved for the sequel. Next we have Melina, who is the sister of Katana, but is the one that really spots her twin sister speaking to an Earthrealmer. While she looks beautiful on the outside, she's secretly a hideous monster with teeth like Baraka's. Along with the main characters on the roster, we have a brand new set of bosses. Kintaro, another 4-armed monster like Goro, and basically plays the same as Goro. And during my MK2 playthrough, I really found him to be a bit easier than Goro. And then there's the big bad Shao Kahn. Shao Kahn I found to be way harder than Shang Tsung, and I think this is a perfect segue to really talk about MK2's difficulty, because the AI in this game is really bad. And I'm so happy that I'm playing this with the MK Legacy Collection, because this game was made to suck up quarters in the arcade. In the original Mortal Kombat, the AI was challenging, but it was sort of fair. But in this game, the AI is a whole new level, as the AI will literally cheat, reading your inputs, and it feels extremely unfair. Since I was playing the Legacy Collection, if you put the game even at a lower difficulty, it barely changes out how hard the difficulty is. But after you defeat Shao Kahn, just like in the first game, you get an ending depending on what character you choose, as they really show like where it really takes place after the events of MK2. The arcade tile, while somewhat similar to the first game, got rid of things like endurance rounds, and now for the most part it's just a straight line to all the fighters you're about to face, although there's a mysterious question mark that's gonna basically take you to where you fight the secret characters. Mortal Kombat 2 wasn't a major improvement over the first, but there was something that they cut out, like the scoring system for the win streaks and the removal of test your might, which was originally planned. Each character now has more than one fatality, but compared to the first game, these fatalities started to go a little more over the top, along with introducing fatalities and fatalities, which are non-lethal fatalities. In the first game, the pit stage had only one stage fatality, but in this game, there are more stage fatalities for certain stages. In the original Mortal Kombat, Reptile was the only secret boss, but in this game, we have 3 brand new secret characters. The first one was Jade, who was a palette swap of both Katana and Melina. The next one we have is Smoke, who is a palette swap of Scorpion. It even shares the same movement. And the last one is the mysterious palette swap ninja that's shrouded in darkness, Noob Saibot, as his name is literally a mix of Ed Boon and John Tobias' last names, but in reverse. Mortal Kombat 2 was another success for Midway, and in 1994, home console ports were released, including the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, Sega 32X, and the Game Gear. The Super Nintendo had the blood kept in, and it was the best way to play the game in terms of visuals. The Sega Genesis had a secret fatality known as a Fergality. And when both Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 came to home consoles, they were given the M13/17 rating, which we know today as the rated M for mature rating. Around this time when Mortal Kombat 1 and 2's were released, we saw the creation of multiple MK clones and rip-offs, but it truly didn't matter as MK was still on top. And the second game specifically truly impacted the story, as later games in the series still use concepts established in this game. And as I mentioned earlier, MK2 was a huge success for Midway, and critics and audience praised the game, and thus it only really made sense for Midway to capitalize the success of MK2. So far in the series, these games were created in a really short month span, but this new entry was expected to take a year and a half to really develop, and thus beginning the development of Mortal Kombat 3. Mortal Kombat 3 was released in April 1995 for the arcades and changed so much for the MK franchise. This game introduced sprinting, a proper combo system which are known as chain combos in this game, and during a match, if you uppercut an opponent, it can trigger a stage transition. You fight an opponent in an entirely new stage. And once again, Dan Forden is back on the soundtrack, but his songs range from like really upbeat tracks to songs that sound a lot more dreadful sounding and sound really atmospheric. A new type of fatality known as the animalities, where a character turns into an animal to finish the opponent. The animalities were actually rumored all the way back in MK2, but they were never real up until this game. Video games in 1995 were slowly transitioning to 3D, and at first MK3 was going to use the 3D system, but stuck to using digitized sprites just like the first two games. Even though MK3 made so many great new changes, it made one really big major change that a lot of longtime fans found to be very controversial. And that is that the roster cut so many characters. Liu Kang, Kung Lao, Sub-Zero, Shang Tsung, and Jax are all returning characters from MK2, along with the return of Sonu and Kano, but the characters like Johnny Cage, Raiden, Reptile, Katana, Baraka, and Melina did not make it in this game, and Scorpion, for 2 games in a row, was a fan favorite and one of the most recognizable characters in the series, was also cut from this roster. This change happened due to some of the actors having behind the scenes issues with Midway, along with some characters either being recast or not even being included. But because of these changes, secret character Noob Saibot had to use Kano's base body as part of his designs. To make up for the new changes to the roster, we got the introduction of 2 brand new cyborg characters, Sector and Cyrax. If you input a secret code, you can unlock Cyber Smoke, the secret ninja from MK2 now turned into a cyborg. Besides the new cyborgs, this game introduced a plethora of new characters. A character to finally bring up as part of this new wave of characters is Stryker. Curtis Stryker, for 2 games in a row, has been scrapped over and over, finally makes his debut in this game. He was once the leader of the Riot Control until a portal opened in America, which took all the souls, and now Stryker is now the last survivor of Shao Kahn's invasion of Earthrealm.
Nightwolf.
Nightwolf is a preserver and historian of people's culture of the Sacred Lands, and he uses magic to protect his people, but since Shao Kahn's raid on Earthrealm, Nightwolf joins with the other Earthrealmers to protect their realm. Next, we have
Cabal,
a speedster whose identity remains a secret. He was attacked during the Shao Kahn's raid on Earthrealm, leaving his face scarred. Cabal, like Darth Vader, is kept alive through an artificial respirator and seeks revenge against Shao Kahn.
Shiva,
the first playable Shao Kahn in a mainline arcade MK game. She was at one point part of Shao Kahn's army until she realized that Shao Kahn was partnering with Motaro, who is the leader of the rival race to the Shao Kahn. And just like the mini-bosses, she was animated in stop motion. The most important newcomer is
Sundel,
but I'll get to her soon once we cover the story of MK3. As I mentioned earlier, we have the 2 ninja characters,
Sector, Cyrax,
who were named Ketchup and Mustard during the development. The 2 cyborg characters were once assassins working for the Lin Kuei, and volunteered to undergo a cyborg transformation. Their new mission was to roboticize everyone in Lin Kuei, including Smoke and Sub-Zero, but Sub-Zero got away, leaving the mission now to hunt down Sub-Zero. But sadly, Smoke tried to escape, but failed and got turned to a cyborg. Despite these great newcomers that are all interesting in their own way, this is one of the worst Mortal Kombat roster in history. Mortal Kombat 3 upon release was considered a mixed bag for fans and critics, but regardless, MK3 still got great reviews and was ported to the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, PC, and the newly released Sony PlayStation, which was very favorable to the arcade release, as well as the release of the other ports for MK3 I didn't mention. At the end of Mortal Kombat 3, it stated how in the fall of 1995, we're gonna get more MK content, and sure enough, we did. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was released in November 1995 in arcades, and is a standalone update to MK3. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 is one of the best Mortal Kombat games of all time, and is truly the definitive way to play MK3. UMK3 brought changes in gameplay where certain characters were altered, and on home ports, introduced brutalities, which were restringent inputs used to finish an opponent. Injuries in MK3 were difficulty options on the towers, but UMK3 added one more difficulty into the mix. UMK3 brought back Scorpion, Katana, and Reptile as playable characters, along with Jade, who like Smoke was originally a secret boss. UMK3 has a set of secret characters such as Melina, a classic version of Sub-Zero, and if you select Cyber Smoke and do a special input, you can play as Human Smoke. And finally, a long anticipated character I've yet to mention. All the way back in the original Mortal Kombat, in the game's audit screen under the Reptile boss, it had the term Ermacs, or Arrow Macros for short. The Arrow Macros tab was used to calculate errors into the game, but people saw this as a secret boss fight with a red ninja named Ermac, and MK2 only fueled these rumors even more. People also started speculating on a female red ninja named Scarlet, and eventually, as a secret character, Ermac became an official character in this game. To spark up the rumors in the game's attack mode, you can see a purple ninja named Rain that isn't playable, but his name is a play on words in the real artist print in his album Purple Rain. UMK3 got another port known as WaveNet in the arcades, which was only released for testing in certain areas. It was lost media for years until the Legacy Collection released this year finally brought it back, and you can play this version along with a playable Noob Saibot. The Super Nintendo port even allowed you to play Noob Saibot, but also Rain. Now that we covered the changes and roster, I really now want to talk about the actual story of Mortal Kombat 3. After Liu Kang defeated Shao Kahn in Outworld, Shao Kahn decides to get the Shadow Priest led by Shang Tsung to revive his deceased wife Sindel in Earthrealm, as he can't do it in Outworld. Shao Kahn merged the realms, which caused many souls on Earth to perish. Raiden saves a few survivors but can't really help further due to his status as an Elder God. So Raiden's chosen warriors now have to defeat Shao Kahn once and for all. And during the raid on Earth, Johnny Cage was killed, which was later revealed in disturbing audio that was found in the files with his gravestone.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to mourn the death of Johnny Cage. Killed at the hands of Kentaro during the second Mortal Kombat, he was only 29 years old. Yet he fought.
Just like the games before, canonically it is Liu Kang that defeats Shao Kahn, and the souls on everyone on Earth are saved. Shao Kahn is seemingly dead, and this game ditches the tournament storyline and is now set in our real world. The stages now reflect how liminal and abandoned Earthrealm has become, and this game even introduced the Netherrealm, which is essentially hell. And this is where Scorpion is currently located. Overall, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was the essential way of playing MK3, and has gotten a lot of ports, including a really terrible GBA port. Mortal Kombat 3, or UMK3 at this case, got one more revision on the PlayStation Nintendo 64 known as the MK Trilogy, which is the same as UMK3 but now with a bigger roster of characters, along with the boss characters, and you can even play as older version of Jax, Kung Lao, Raiden, and Kano. In both the Nintendo 64 version and PlayStation versions, you can play as the secret characters Chameleon. Chameleon in different versions will be a gender swap version of either the female ninjas or the male ninjas. MK Trilogy still plays the same as MK3, but the biggest new change now is the aggressive meter. As the longer the fight goes, once that bar is full, you can deal more damage and move a lot more faster. Certain endings in Mortal Kombat Trilogy and UMK3 reveal a hint of what would the MK4 really be like. These endings included mentions of Shinnok, the Brotherhood of Shadow, and these concepts were so interesting, and fans were wondering, what could Mortal Kombat 4 really have in store for us? And a potential fourth tournament? This seemed quite exciting, but we wouldn't see this fourth new entry until 2 years later. Mortal Kombat 4 dropped on September 11, 1997, and it's the last mainline game to be released in arcades. Before its release, Mortal Kombat 4 toured all across America with its eventual 1997 release. The biggest thing to note about MK4 is that it ditches the digitized sprites and now made the full switch into 3D. The gameplay remains similar to MK3, but there were some new additions, and introduced a damage cap system which prevented doing infinite combos. Each character had a weapon mechanic along with grabbing items off the ground, and the biggest movement change was the sidestepping. Mortal Kombat 3 in terms of the arcade towers was practically the same as the other two games before it, but this time around there is no mini boss to speak of. at least in the arcade ports, as the home ports, Goro is once again used as the mini-boss. In the other MK games, when you beat an arcade ladder, you usually get an image and text explaining what the characters do after they defeat the enemy, but this time around, you actually get to see fully animated cutscenes. And yeah, these cutscenes are, they're definitely something, alright.
Dragon died with Kano. You're the last one, Jarek. Come in, Major Briggs. This is Lieutenant Sonya Blade. What?
Sonya, this is Major Briggs. Come in. Sonya, this is Jax. Are you there? Going somewhere, Jarek? Jax! I thought you were going to... Thought I was what? Dead? Like my partner you just tossed off the cliff? I'm sorry, Jax. Please, don't drop me. Wait, I promise. Too late, Jarek. You can't drop me. You have to uphold the law. You have to arrest me. Wait, this is brutality. You can't do it. Wrong, Jarek. This is not a brutality. This is a fatality.
The story of MK4 is quite different, as we have a new villain named Shinnok, who is a fallen elder god, who at one point tried to rule the realms but Raiden stopped him. He's once again returned with the help of sorcerer Quan Chi, who made his game debut in MK Mythology Sub-Zero. Shinnok is also aided by Tanya, who is a traitor to Edenia, and prepares to take down the elder gods. Raiden is once again tasked to get Earthrealm's champions to defeat this new threat. And just like the games before, it is up to Liu Kang to defeat Shinnok, and after saving Edenia, Kitana invites Liu Kang to rule by her side, but he refuses and continues to be Earthrealm's champion. Mortal Kombat's roster has similar favorites like the aforementioned Liu Kang and Raiden, along with Sonya, Scorpion, Reptile, Sub-Zero, Jax, and Johnny Cage, who was revived during the events of MK Trilogy, along with 7 brand new characters added to this roster, starting with Quan Chi. As I stated earlier, he is a sorcerer who is by Shinnok's side, but he mostly dwells in the Netherrealm, and his first ever appearance was in the animated show Defenders of the Realm, but Quan Chi's proper video game debut was in the aforementioned Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero.
Shinnok
is a fallen elder god and is the final boss of this game, but he was also the final boss in Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero as well. But unlike Shao Kahn, you can actually play as him in the base roster. Well, I know Shao Kahn was an MK Trilogy, but I'm talking about in an arcade release game.
Fujin
Who is the god of wind and is the ally to Raiden, just like Quan Chi and Shinnok before him, also made his debut in Mythology Sub-Zero as a boss. Another newcomer is
Tanya,
who is the traitor to Edenia, as I stated before, and is debated in the community whether she is considered a female ninja or not. Tanya's name comes from one of Ed Boon's sisters, just like Sonya.
Jarek
is the final member of the Black Dragon after Kano died in MK3, and that's kind of it. That's all I really have for Jarek. Next we have
Kai,
like Liu Kang and Kung Lao, he is another Shaolin monk and is the best friend to Liu Kang. And just like Jarek, I gotta be honest, that's really all I have for Kai.
Rico
He's a more interesting character, as not only is he a member of Shinnok's army and a deadly assassin, but people in the community debate if he's really a ninja or not. At the end of his arcade ending, at least in MK Gold, he takes on Shao Kahn's mask, and fans theorize for years whether Reiko is the new Emperor Outworld, or he was Shao Kahn all along. At least in Mortal Kombat 4, Noob Saibot was a playable character on the base roster, but it looks like he was eventually cut out of the game. So, instead he was replaced by Reiko. But something a little more interesting is that there is another secret character known as Meat, which uses the character's other moves. In the original arcade releases, if you actually beat the game with Meat, it will crash the game. But however though, if you actually play it on the Legacy Collection, you can actually see arcade endings altered to be fit with Meat's playstyle, and admittedly this is actually pretty funny. Mortal Kombat 4, just like the base version of MK3 before, was a mixed bag for fans and critics. Mortal Kombat 4 enters a brand new characters that fans felt were uninspired and bland. Jarek is just a more boring version of Kano, and I feel that the game doesn't really do much with Kai being a potential successor to Liu Kang. Fans felt that the combo system wasn't as satisfying in 3 and that it was stripped down to simplify it. Even during 1997 standards, Mortal Kombat 4 just didn't look as good compared to other fighting games released in that year. And Mortal Kombat 4 did get a UMK3-like revision called MK Gold, which gave the game better graphics and an expensive roster, but the problem was that it was released on the Sega Dreamcast, a console that sold poorly compared to PlayStation and Nintendo 64. Overall, the late 90s was just not a good era for the MK franchise. Prior to MK4, we got the release of Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero, a game with overall bad and clunky controls. The idea of it being an adventure fighting game platformer was very cool on paper, but in execution, it was very unsatisfying to play, along with the game's difficulty being very frustrating to play through. 2 years later, after the release of the first film, we got the sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, a rushed film that had terrible special effects and received terrible reviews on release. And around this time in the late 90s, arcades were once again in decline, but there were still arcade titles that pushed what was possible in terms of hardware. Home consoles like the Nintendo 64, Sony PlayStation, Sega Saturn could not only replicate the arcade experience, but also had games that were generation defined that truly impacted the video game industry. And Mortal Kombat was once a fighting game that people would flock to the arcades to, but because of the decline of arcades, along with Mortal Kombat as a franchise, Mortal Kombat really had a rough transition to 3D, as new fighting games really surpassed Mortal Kombat in terms of innovation, and the shock value seeing bloody and gory fatalities just wasn't shocking to audiences anymore. And it didn't help that on June 29, 2000, we got the release of Mortal Kombat Special Forces, another prequel spin-off that has Jax as our lead character, and this game ended up being one of the worst Mortal Kombat games ever created, and it was one of the projects that really hurt the franchise's reputation. The only thing worth knowing about this game was that this was the first entrance of the Earth-based ninja Tremor, who was supposed to be an MK trilogy but got scrapped. Overall, Mortal Kombat during the late 90s was falling behind in relevancy, and people started getting Mortal Kombat fatigued. And it didn't help that arcades were becoming a slowly failing market at this point, and thus the classic era of Mortal Kombat came to an end. But before we get to my overall thoughts on the history of Mortal Kombat, I think it's time I talk about the Legacy Collection and how Digital Eclipse absolutely botched this release. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's awesome that we have definitive collection of these games with not only their arcade ports, but their console ports playable on modern systems, and you can even play MK Mythology Sub-Zero and Special Forces on this collection, and while they are really shitty games, this is a huge win for game preservation. The Legacy Collection, as I stated earlier, even added MK3 WaveNet, which was at one point lost media. This collection is so cool, but I don't know how they fumbled this collection so badly. First of all, the online doesn't even work properly, and even when it does, the sound sounds really bad. Along with really slow matchmaking, and there were even reports of garbage input lag, even in the single player content, like what? But the biggest one that really hurts the game a lot, for me and others, is the fact that there's lack of lobbies, and basically you can't even play with friends online or even crossplay. Like the whole point of a fighting game, besides the gameplay, is playing with friends, and the fact you can't do that at launch just makes this whole collection not worth it. I mean, sure, later down the line, they'll fix these changes, making this video potentially dated, but currently, in its current state, and at launch, at the time of making this video, this collection is missing core features at $50, mind you, making this collection one of the biggest fumbles I have seen with this franchise. Mortal Kombat at the release of MK Special Forces was seemingly at its lowest point, and it didn't help that in 1999, series co-creator John Tobias left Midway, along with other former Midway staff members, to start their own studio. Midway, after MK4, was struggling to find innovative ways to really grow the series and expand the gameplay from the original arcade era. But on November 16, 2002, on the PlayStation 2, we got the release of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, a game that, while continuing the storyline from the arcade era, overhauled a lot of gameplay from that era and now made Mortal Kombat fully embrace being a 3D fighter. This game, unlike the previous titles, never released in arcades, and the series stayed like that ever since. And this game really revived the MK name, spawning 2 more sequels, a beat-em-up semi-remake of MK2, and Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe, which was the final game that Midway released before filing for bankruptcy, leaving WB's game division to buy out Midway. And since they bought out Midway, this created NetherRealm Studios, a studio that permanently focused on Mortal Kombat. And since they made this new studio, they decided to release a new game that would single-handedly revive the MK name, Mortal Kombat 2011, or MK9 for short. And this game was a soft reboot of the series and retold the events of MK 1-3. Mortal Kombat 9 was such a huge success that it even saw play at EVO, and MKX and 11 came out shortly, and like MK9, they were a huge success, even creating the Injustice games, a DC-based fighting game series that used to style Mortal Kombat's gameplay, but without the fatalities. While the latest NS release, Mortal Kombat 1, is a pretty divisive game among fans, it sold extremely well commercially, and in 2021 we got the release of the MK film, that is actually going to get a sequel soon in 2026. And this year in 2025, we got the Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, which, like I stated earlier, was a mixed bag for fans. Overall, Mortal Kombat is up there as one of the most iconic fighting game series ever created. The series has a pretty recognizable cast of characters, a really catchy techno theme song that I cannot play because of copyright, and the series is one of the best selling fighting game series of all time. Mortal Kombat, despite its ups and downs, will go down in history as one of the most influential video games that pushed the violence in video games, with its groundbreaking technology that also helped expand the growing market of fighting games that we have today. And that is the true impact of Mortal Kombat.